6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland.
In 2026, researchers fed over 3 centuries of accumulated data from Stonehenge into Grok AI for analysis. This included every survey, every map, every archaeological record, every astronomical calculation, and every geophysical scan ever done at Stonehenge. They were looking to find connections, patterns that the human mind couldn't see. But no one was prepared for the answer that Grok gave. It was a complete reframing of everything we thought we knew. The stones are not placed randomly. It is an acoustic model, functioning as an environment for sound control. And the pits all around Stonehenge, the ones we thought were just some crude digging, they encode a lunar cycle so mathematically precise that scientists cannot explain how a preliterate society calculated it. This is the story of what Stonehenge actually is. Let's get into it. Asking the wrong question. The story we know about Stonehenge goes something like this. Neolithic people were equipped with basic tools and remarkable collective determination. Over the course of many generations, they built a ceremonial monument on Salisbury Plain, UK. They hauled enormous stones from distant locations as an act of religious devotion, aligning them with the sun. They also buried their dead near it. And then, around 1600 BC, they stopped coming, and the monument was gradually forgotten until the modern world rediscovered it. That story is not wrong exactly, but it was built by looking at Stonehenge in pieces, one study examining the stones, another examining the astronomy, and yet another examining the burial records, without connecting them into a single picture. For 300 years, researchers produced a vast archive of records that sat in separate disciplines. They were never combined into a single research. That changed in 2026. AI analysis was applied not to generate new theories, but to read the existing data all at once, as one interconnected system, to find the patterns that human researchers had been unable to detect. The instruction was explicit. Nothing new was to be invented. No story was to be constructed from imagination. The existing data simply had to be read in a new way. And the picture that emerged from that reading was not the one anyone expected. Because the real mystery of Stonehenge is not about who built it. We already have a reasonable understanding of that. The real mystery is why they made it, and what they were encoding in stone. Was it knowledge they fully understood, or knowledge they were desperately trying not to lose? That question leads directly to 56 holes in the ground, and a number that should not exist. 56 holes, a calculator. Just inside the outer earthwork circle of Stonehenge, there is a ring of pits, 56 of them, arranged in a near-perfect circle, approximately 86 meters across. They were documented in the 17th century by the English antiquarian John Aubrey, which is why they are called the Aubrey Holes today. Some of them contained cremated human remains. Some appear to have held upright timber posts or small stones at various points in the monument's history. Many of their original contents and purposes are still debated. What wasn't debated, however, was the spacing. The distances between the 56 pits are not uniform. They vary. And for most of history, that variation was treated as evidence of imprecision. It was an expected limitation of people working with simple tools and doing everything by hand. The consensus was that it was a mistake. But then AI analysis entered the picture. It measured the distances between all 56 pits down to the millimeter and plotted them in sequence. What it revealed was not a mistake. It was intentional. The spacing distances, graphed in order around the circle, produce a pattern that rises and falls according to a fixed mathematical rule, something close to a sine wave. And that pattern maps almost exactly onto one of the most important astronomical cycles on Earth, the lunar nodal cycle, the 18.6-year period in which the Moon's orbit shifts between its maximum and minimum tilt relative to the Earth's equator. In some years, the Moon rises and sets at its highest points on the horizon. In others, it barely climbs at all. The full cycle takes 18.6 years to complete. And here is the number that leaves you stunned. 18.6 multiplied by 3 equals 55.8, effectively 56. The number of Aubrey holes is not a coincidence. It is not a mistake. And it is not imprecision. It appears to be a tracking system. A circle of 56 markers was used with a single counting stone, moved one pit at a time to mark each lunar month. This would allow a person standing at Stonehenge to track the Moon's nodal cycle indefinitely, predicting not just when the Moon would rise, but also where it would rise. You can also predict lunar eclipses. Boston University astronomer Gerald Hawkins proposed a version of this theory in the 1960s. He called the Aubrey Circle a lunar eclipse predictor. In 2024, English Heritage formally launched a collaborative research project with the Royal Astronomical Society. Archaeoastronomers from Bournemouth, Oxford, and Leicester specifically came to investigate Stonehenge's lunar alignments. We thought it was a mistake. Crude spacing errors from an ancient people. It is actually a calculator to measure the Moon's orbital behavior. Whoever dug those 56 pits was not just watching the Moon casually. They were tracking behavior across decades, understanding its cycle in mathematical terms. Then, encoding that cycle in a form that could be used to predict celestial events years in advance. But such a task would require specific instruments and tools. The stones chosen for this purpose could not have been just any stone. They were chosen for a very specific purpose: the stones that sing. The outer ring is of massive sarsen stones, each one over 20 feet tall, each one weighing up to 25 tons, and transported 20 miles from the Marlborough Downs. Inside that ring are the blue stones, the inner circle. They look smaller only because the outer stones are so enormous. In reality, these are substantial rocks, each weighing up to 4 tons. They came from the Preseli Hills in West Wales. That is approximately 150 miles from Salisbury Plain. The question that has occupied archaeologists for generations is why. If you need stone for a monument, you can use local stone. Salisbury Plain has stone. There was no obvious engineering reason to transport 4-ton rocks from 150 miles away. Comparable rocks were available nearby. So why go through the extraordinary effort of moving these specific stones from that specific place across that specific distance? The answer was discovered in 2013 by the London Royal College of Arts. They were testing over 1,000 stones along the Preseli Ridge. And it may be the strangest thing confirmed about Stonehenge. The blue stones, when struck, produce metallic sounds, pure bell-like tones, gong resonances, tin drum notes. It is unlike any other stone formation tested. Between 5 and 10% of the rocks in the region ring when struck with a small hammerstone. In concentrated hotspots along the ridge, that figure rises to 15 to 20%. Occasionally, even higher. These are lithophones, stones that function as musical instruments. This was an enormous discovery by the researchers from the Royal College of Art and Bournemouth University. They received unprecedented permission from English Heritage to acoustically test the blue stones at Stonehenge itself. They found that many of the stones were embedded in concrete in the 1950s restoration work, which the researchers noted had suppressed much of the acoustic bounce. However, the stones still resonated when struck. Some of the sonic potential had been lost, but the property was still unmistakably present. The local sarsen stones from Salisbury Plain do not ring the same way. They thud. The blue stones sing. Acoustic modeling of Stonehenge's complete original form was conducted. With every stone in its intended position, the results added another layer. The configuration of the stones creates controlled sound reflection. Stand inside the completed circle, and sound does not simply echo. It concentrates. There are zones of higher acoustic energy and zones of lower energy. The circular geometry focuses sound inward in a way that an open landscape does not replicate. Low-frequency sound inside the Stonehenge creates an acoustic environment. The people of those times could not experience something like that anywhere else. The kind of sound that you feel in your chest, resonance that your body responds to before your mind can categorize it. An environment engineered not just to be seen, but to be experienced. Stones chosen for their sound carried 150 miles because nowhere else had what they needed. But stones aren't the only thing that made that journey. The bones from Wales. This is something that archaeology confirmed only in 2018. It changes what we think Stonehenge was used for more profoundly than almost any other discovery. The people buried at Stonehenge weren't local. Analysis of cremated human remains found at the site revealed a striking pattern through strontium isotope analysis. Strontium is absorbed from soil into plants, and from plants into human bone over the course of a lifetime. The ratio of strontium isotopes in a person's skeleton, therefore, reflects the geology of the land where they grew up. The remains of the skeletons dated to the monument's earliest phases, between roughly 3000 and 2400 BC. At least 10 of the 25 cremated individuals analyzed did not grow up on the Wessex chalk where Stonehenge stands. Their strontium ratios matched the geology of Western Britain, specifically West Wales, the same region where the bluestones came from. Some of them appear to have been cremated in Wales. Their remains were carried to Stonehenge for burial, according to archaeologists. One researcher's excavation notes from the 1920s described the cremated remains in the Aubrey holes as having apparently been brought from a distant place for interment. What this means is that Stonehenge was not a local monument for local people. It was a destination. People traveled from Wales, the same place where the bluestones originated, to be buried here. Their remains made the same journey the stones had made. Their graves are clustered in the southeastern part of the monument, toward the direction of the moon's most southerly rising point. Stonehenge was never alone. Everything we have discussed so far concerns a circle of roughly 100 meters on a plain in Wiltshire. But Stonehenge was never just that circle. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project is the largest geophysical mapping survey of its kind ever undertaken. The project spent 4 years scanning across 12 square kilometers of the landscape surrounding the monument. They used remote sensing technologies, ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and LiDAR. The results described by the researchers are startling, revealing hundreds of previously unknown features buried in the ground. UNESCO and English Heritage formally recognized that Stonehenge is not an isolated monument. It is part of a prehistoric landscape, a system in which every element is connected to a larger design that spans the surrounding territory. The circle everyone photographs is the center point of something much bigger. And here is what makes the hidden landscapes data even more significant. Some of the earthworks, burial mounds, and landscape marks surrounding Stonehenge are older than Stonehenge itself. The famous standing stone circle was not the beginning of the design. It may have been the final phase of it. The blueprint came first. The stones came later. And someone maintained that blueprint, remembering it, following it, passing it on, across centuries. But when you look closer, that maintenance itself starts telling an unsettling story. The precision, the knowledge, it is going in the wrong direction. A civilization forgetting itself. This is the part that really makes you stop. When different phases of Stonehenge's construction are studied in close sequence, a pattern emerges in the accuracy of the work. And the pattern is not what you would expect. The earliest phases are the most precise. In the original and earliest arrangements, alignment accuracy, stone spacing, and structural symmetry are at their highest. As time passes and later phases of construction follow, that precision systematically decreases. Some stones are slightly off in angle. Some alignments are not as sharp as the originals. Some positioning falls short of the mathematical exactness achieved by whoever began the project. The tool marks on the stones tell the same story. Different phases show different carving techniques on the same stones, suggesting that later builders were attempting to replicate or complete work begun by earlier generations. In several places, the craftsmanship falls just short of the original standard, as if the later workers were studying what had already been built, but could no longer fully understand or reproduce its precision. If a society is developing a skill, its precision improves over time. That is the pattern we expect from learning, from novice to expert, from rough to refined. Stonehenge shows the opposite. The knowledge was at its highest at the beginning, and it degraded over generations. This can only mean one thing. The people building Stonehenge in its later phases were not creating something new. They were attempting to preserve and continue a design they had inherited. They just lacked the skill to fully replicate it. And from here, Stonehenge changes completely in meaning: abandonment or preservation. Around 1600 BC, active construction and use of Stonehenge began to decline. But what happened at the end is not what you would expect from a civilization simply moving on. Some stones were deliberately laid down on the ground. Some areas were carefully covered over. There was no catastrophic event, no evidence of violent destruction, no indication that the site was abandoned in haste or fear. What the evidence suggests is something closer to a deliberate decision. People who knew they could not maintain the system any longer, but were determined not to simply let it disappear. Some researchers have described it as preservation behavior, protecting what remained rather than continuing what could not be sustained. The end of Stonehenge is not the story of a civilization abandoning a monument. It is the story of people who understood that the knowledge behind the monument was slipping away from them. They arranged the stones as carefully as they could, putting them on the ground rather than knocking them down, and covering what they could not carry, because they wanted something to remain, not for themselves. They knew they would not be back. For whoever came after, who might one day understand what it meant. They were encoding a message in the only material they had that would last: stone. Now, 5,000 years later, with 3 centuries of data read through a system that can hold all of it at once, we can finally see what they left behind, the full picture. So, after the AI revelations, this is what we now know. The 56 Aubrey holes encode the Moon's 18.6-year nodal cycle, a calculator precise enough that modern astronomers are actively testing it. The blue stones were selected for sonic properties, transported 150 miles because their acoustic behavior was essential to the structure's function as an experiential environment. The wider landscape is a designed system of monuments spanning kilometers, with Stonehenge as its center. The people buried inside it traveled from the same place as the stones that sang around their remains. and the precision of the entire structure was highest at the beginning, declined steadily over centuries. Meaning someone at the origin of this project understood something that later generations could only partially preserve. The people who built it knew it was being forgotten. They watched the precision slip. They felt the knowledge was degrading across generations, and they did not give up. They kept building, kept maintaining, kept trying to pass on something. The real question the AI analysis leaves us with is not how they built Stonehenge. It is what they knew at the beginning that made all of this worth doing, and whether that knowledge is still in the stones, waiting for someone to finally read it correctly. So, what do you think? Have we uncovered what the Neolithic builders were trying to preserve? Or is there still a much bigger mystery waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.